All right, so welcome everyone to Mortar Minutes, Timing is Everything with the Architects Foundation's Octagon. Before we get started, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping tips for everyone. As you can see, your camera is off, your mic is muted, and please feel free to ask questions anytime via the chat. We are planning to answer all questions towards the end of the webinar, but please, as we're going through everything, feel free to submit them, and then we'll do kind of a Q&A session with jen.levisen and Marci. So really quick, we're going to transition into showing our videos. So Marci and Jen, let's get us all going with that. Just give me 1 second. All right, I can see myself. Let's see here. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
How's it going? And
Good,
Marci,
thanks.
let me see if I can help you out here.
It says I can't start my video because you have stopped it.
Oh, I know. Oh, no. Let me see if I can get this figured out quickly. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Let's see. Oh, no. Well, let me, how can I do that? Oh. All right, just a second. I'm sorry, everybody, for the delay.
No problem.
Marci. Okay. Okay, I have Marci back. I'm going to ask to unmute.
That's so rare that people want me to unmute.
All right.
There we are.
There you go. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. As you know, I'm a new community manager here at Mortar, so I'm still getting my feet wet with using the webinar portion of Zoom, so thanks for your patience. So yeah, well, today we have jen.levisen and Marci here to join us. So if you both want to introduce yourselves and just share a little bit more about your roles and what we're going to be chatting about today.
Definitely. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. As Lindsay mentioned, my name is jen.levisen. This is our first ever Forum Presents webinar. We're taking a little bit of a detour from the typical Mortar Minutes programming. So it was exciting to see interest from all of you. So thanks again for joining us. I am Mortar's Communications Director, and I also serve as editor of our forum, which is an online journal that tells stories about the people and the projects that really bring the built environment to life. Earlier this year, Mortar and the Architects Foundation partnered together to kind of initially digitize the Octagon experience. And so you can now tour the Octagon online at mortar.com. And a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit down and chat with Marci for a forum article, and I'm so excited to be able to continue the conversation with her today for all of you. So Marci, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We've really enjoyed our partnership with Mortar. And again, as Executive Director of the Architects Foundation, I'm privileged to be a steward of this fantastic building, and I'm happy to share some more about it with your audience today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, I think before we dive in, we all have very beautiful, interesting backgrounds. So part of that, wanted to explain really quickly, and I know Lindsay is going to be populating our chat with a lot of links for all of you to kind of grab and get a little bit more information. But when we kicked off our partnership, we put together an awesome downloadable package of images from the Octagon, which you can find on mortar.com, but images from the Octagon that you can upload to your video conferencing platform background. So we're on Zoom right now, and so it was really easy to add a virtual background. So Marci, could you tell us a little bit about where everyone's located?
So it looks like Lindsay, beautiful Lindsay, is showing us the stair hall in the Octagon. And what's very interesting, and we'll get into some of these details later, so to her right, you see the grand staircase that the Taylor family and their guests, James and Dolly Madison, would have used to go throughout the house. There's to Lindsay's left, you see what we call a hidden door. And there are a number of hidden doors in the Octagon, and they are, behind those doors are the service stairs to the building. So that is where the enslaved people and sometimes the children would be coming and going throughout the house to be kind of kept away from the guests. Those stairs that door to Lindsay's left, that is the only way to get down to the basement level of the house where the enslaved people would have worked and many of them would have lived. Jen is in the entry, what we call just the rotunda, the main entrance to the Octagon. And to her right actually is the newly restored Treaty of Ghent table. That is the actual table where the Treaty of Ghent was signed that ended the War of 1812 when the Octagon served as the White House. And near that treaty table, the portrait on the wall is Dr. William Thornton, who was the architect of the Octagon. And the other portrait is Colonel John Taylor, for whom the house was built. And I am in the treaty room, which served as Colonel Taylor's office. It's also a room where the children may sometimes have taken some studies with a tutor, or where the family would have had small intimate family dinners when they weren't entertaining in the large dining room for their guests. And of course, this round room was the Oval Office when the Octagon was the White House following the burning of Washington on August 24th, 1814.
Awesome. So I would wholeheartedly agree that these backgrounds are much better than anything you might find in a regular person's home or even in their office. So you guys should check out that link and download your favorite images and have a little fun with your coworkers too. But we will get started with some questions now. And I know Lindsay is going to do her best to keep us on track. This is a 30-minute webinar. So thank you in advance, Lindsay, for doing that. Marci, if you could start us off by briefly explaining the relationship between the Architects Foundation, the AIA, and the Octagon, because I know while the Octagon is the Architects Foundation's headquarters now, it was originally the AIA's headquarters too. So if you could start us with that.
Sure. So the Architects Foundation is a 501c3 charitable organization. We are the philanthropic partner of the American Institute of Architects, a 501c6 professional association. So briefly, at the Architects Foundation, we believe that architects use the power of design to solve problems, transform lives, and create a better world. So our mission is to lead philanthropic efforts to attract, inspire, and invest in a next generation design community to have positive impact in the world. For the Institute, our 501c6 partner, a lot of their interest right now is in a diverse pipeline for the future of the profession. So we'll talk a little bit more about our scholarship programs, which are at the heart of our mission-driven programs. We have 8 different scholarship programs, but the one the Institute is most interested in right now, and many people are, is our Diversity Advancement Scholarship Program. But in a nutshell, I mentioned the Taylor family for whom the Octagon was built between 1799 and 1801. After Mrs. Taylor passed away, the house stayed in the family hands, but it was rented out for a number of different purposes. It was a girls' school for a while. It was the hydrological survey office for the United States government at one time. But in 1898, when the American Institute of Architects was looking to move their headquarters from New York to the nation's capital, an architect named Glenn Brown came down to Washington, D.C. and started looking for property near the Capitol or the White House to make a home for the AIA. And when he saw the Octagon, he fell in love with the building. At that time, it was tenement housing for 10 families, and it was in somewhat of a state of disrepair. But he negotiated to rent the building starting in 1898. The Institute started making repairs. They purchased the building in 1899, and the Octagon served as the headquarters for the American Institute of Architects until they outgrew not only the Octagon, but at one time there were some other outbuildings behind it. The stables was one that the AIA was using as offices. And finally in around 1970, they decided to build their own headquarters building, which actually kind of embraces the edges of the original Taylor property. So there's kind of a campus now with the Octagon at one end and actually a brutalist building around the back of the original Taylor property. So it made sense at the time when the AIA moved into their new building that the Octagon became owned and managed as the headquarters for the philanthropy. And we operate it as a historic house museum, as well as what we've been trying to do since I came to the Architects Foundation in 2017 is use this as kind of the inspire piece of our mission. The Octagon is the place of inspiration where we want to have, you know, provocative and timely conversations about issues of the day, especially around how architects and architecture can influence culture. So that's my spiel.
Definitely. Now, to go back to the history of the Octagon, just for a little bit. Now, it was built by slaves. I know John Taylor was the largest slave owner in the area at the time. And so, could you talk a little bit about how the Octagon is addressing that? It's just such a, I mean, it's such an interesting topic, but especially now with current events going on across the nation. Can you talk a little bit about how you address that at the Octagon?
Sure. So the Octagon was being built around the same time as the White House and the Capitol. And Dr. William Thornton, who was the original architect of the Capitol, actually is the architect of the Octagon. And actually, many enslaved people and craftspeople were being shared between these properties as, you know, the nation's capital was emerging. So that's one thing to note. And I was actually thinking about it. I was looking through the Mortar gallery while we were waiting to get started. And I noticed in some of the pictures of the drawing room, and actually, Jen, the room you're in now, if you look at the crown molding around the top of the room, many of those details would have been in the original White House, and they were lost when that building was burned. So you can imagine that this is a place actually where people can see what was in some buildings that were built by some of the same people at the same time of the day that may no longer be around. When we interpret the Octagon as a museum, we have been commended by some of our peers in the Historic House Museum world for how we do talk about the lives of all people that would have inhabited the Octagon. So Colonel Taylor, as you mentioned, he had a plantation, Mount Airy. It still remains in the family today. And he would bring about a dozen to 14 enslaved people from Mount Airy to the Octagon, which was their winter home. The Taylors were friends of George Washington, and Colonel Taylor had some political aspirations. And Anne Ogle Taylor kind of fancied the notion of maybe starting the social scene in the new emerging nation's capital. So this is where they came to spend their winters. So they would have there would have been a handful of enslaved people keeping the house up all year. A dozen or so would have come from Mount Airy when the Taylors were spending the winters in the house. And when you do a self-guided tour, you can actually kind of pick up a brochure and turn a page to a certain persona. And one of those is Winnie Jackson, who is, we don't know a lot about the enslaved people that the Taylors owned, but we do know that Winnie Jackson and her husband came to work in the Octagon, and Winnie was Anne Ogle Taylor's lady's maid. Her husband, actually, Billy, was a cook in the kitchen. So we show where they would have lived and worked. Again, we talk about the enslaved people and their role in the house. We talk about the hidden doors. Another popular hidden door is where the porter would have been able to go and see who might be calling on the family and see if he could take care of the business or needed to call on one of the residents. But, you know, again, my board of directors, we have a volunteer board that is really energized about the potential that we have to be even more open and candid and talk about all of the people that were part of Washington, D.C. when this house was built. And kind of, we feel like, to use my president's term, we're at the tip of the spear, and there's a lot of work to be done. We're excited about that and excited about bringing other partners along. And again, what are some of the inspirational conversations we can have, provocative, and, you know, how can we get comfortable being uncomfortable, talking more fully about where we were in the era when the building was built, where we're going culturally, and where the profession of architecture will be taking us.
Definitely. Now, I had a note to share the White House Historical Society article on the Octagon and slavery. So I will post that link in the chat so that people can dive in. It shows it's a great kind of retelling of that time, and it has a beautiful rendering of the Octagon as well, so you can kind of see the layout and the different floors. And Marci, you were mentioning that hidden staircase earlier that you'd access, I think on Lindsay's side, excuse me. And so it just shows you kind of the juxtaposition of the building. And so I'll make sure to add that into the chat.
I'm adding it right now as we speak.
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
and just to note, that is one of Glenn Brown's drawings. Glenn Brown did some amazing renderings of the building, and that is one of his drawings. And we also have on our website, for those of you that may be entertaining kids at home, what we call activity pages. And those again take some of Glenn Brown's drawings, and you can talk about architecture in your neighborhood. You can talk about some of the beautiful crown molding details and things like that. So folks, feel free to visit our website and look for the activity pages.
Yeah, I will say the activity series was a hit with my second grader. And he had such a blast looking at the pages and then going on and seeing the different pictures. So thank you guys for doing that.
And ladies, just so you know, we're at the halfway point.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Now, can you talk a little bit about some of the social and civic work that the Architects Foundation is doing now, Marci? You had mentioned those diversity scholarships, and I think it would be great. I mean, that just highlights so much how you are, kind of honoring and exploring the history of the building and aligning with the AIA's work. So if you could talk a little bit more about those now.
Sure. So actually we have two galleries on the same floor as the treaty room where I am. And the first exhibition we had after I joined the foundation was commemorating Whitney Young's speech to the American Institute of Architects in 1968, challenging them to become a more diverse profession, because architects as community builders need to reflect the communities they serve. And certainly at that time they did not. We still have a long way to go. But our diversity scholarships were part of that challenge that Whitney Young made in 1968. So we've been awarding those scholarships since 1970. And we've given about 2,300 scholarships to minorities and disadvantaged students to become architects. And today that scholarship is still going strong. We also have just launched an effort on student debt relief. We're trying to raise about $15,000 to match a generous gift that a donor has made. Architecture students take on about 25% more student loan debt than the average college student because of the intensive nature of the education and the supplies for studio and things like that. So we're trying to be able to grant a $5,000 annual debt relief grant, which basically would pay off about a year's worth of loan payments for an architecture student. We realize that scholarships are not the silver bullet. The Institute is made up of multiple chapters across the country. There's state and local and national levels to the organization, and the locals are doing a great job of reaching down into elementary and middle schools to introduce kids to architecture. So we're trying to figure out how can we kind of pull through those efforts and communicate about that and inform potential scholarship applicants to our diversity scholarships. We are piloting an internship program with HKS Architects. This is a firm that has done a lot of work to make their firm culture very welcoming to diverse architects and emerging professionals. So we're piloting a program to get our diversity scholars into HKS offices around the country. We're trying to mentor our students to align with AIA chapters and get involved with chapters there and find mentors and activities to help them see what's on the other end of the educational spectrum. And I mean, and at the end of the day, we're having some really interesting conversations about the culture of architecture, from the studio in school to the studio in the workplace, and getting out of this headspace of, weeding out the people that can't make it and embracing talent and trying to nurture it along. the Institute has published some guides to equitable practice as a way for architecture firms to look at how they're running their firms and being welcoming to diverse audiences. So there's a lot of work going on. And again, the Octagon is a place where we think, you know, we can take conversations from the historical to the present to a better future for everybody. So it's exciting. I don't know if I missed anything that we might have talked about in the article, but there's a lot going on.
No, definitely. I loved your comment about, you know, it's not just one silver bullet. It's not one thing that's going to help make impactful change in the industry and in the world, you know, at large. And I love the AIA's efforts, you know, for those younger kids and those local communities and work in colleges and work and then kind of in the profession, so that that experience kind of is similar and it carries you through your schooling and into your career. So I love that information. Thank you. Now you had mentioned when we were talking earlier this week that you guys have a new project with Smith Group,
Yes.
the Society's Cage, and I will actually share my screen now. I keep forgetting to do that, but if you could talk a little bit about that work, it's fascinating, and it's right in your backyard in DC.
Absolutely, we're really excited. Smith Group Architects, they happen to be our across the street neighbor in DC. They're across New York Avenue from us. And they reached out because they have designed a pavilion called Society's Cage. A group of Black architects in the firm designed this project, and they have negotiated for a prime spot on the National Mall during the August 28th March on Washington that will be commemorating Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech at the Lincoln Memorial. So this is a provocative, bold, interactive pavilion that interprets the experience of Black Americans in a way that you can become aware of the historic forces of racialized state violence and that oppressive nature, but you also are given the opportunity through experiencing the pavilion to heal. It will be on the mall, I believe, for a little over a week. And if we raise enough money, we'll be able to perhaps bring it to the Octagon. There's a courtyard between the Octagon and the AI headquarters. And we'd love to try to install it there for a while and maybe move it to other locations. So in, gosh, less than a week, we've actually raised more than $10,000. There are also some corporate pledges that we do not have on the books yet. So we're well on our way. Smith Group is committed for this installation to happen on August 28th. The fundraising will enhance the programming and will enhance our ability to have this live on beyond the March on Washington. So this is another great partnership that we were so happy to make realized.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And Lindsay, I think if you could add this link into the chat, then people can click through and discover more and support as well. So
yes,
thank you. Awesome. Now, I thought at this point we could kind of transition to some Q&A. I know we had a couple of questions come in at the beginning of the webinar. So Lindsay, if you could kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. And you guys are on time. It's 1:23, so I'm impressed.
You run a tight ship.
So how has COVID impacted the Octagon?
Oh, great question. We had an amazing exhibit launch Thursday before everything shut down at the Octagon. So, you know, it was really kind of funny because we're open to the public Thursday, Friday, and Saturday afternoons from 1 to 4. And that Friday in March is when the Smithsonian announced they were closing. And so I told my staff, we're opening on Saturday. There's going to be people wandering around who will want to come in and see our exhibit. It's on the, it's not about social justice as much as about actually the architect's responsibility to nature and sustainability. It's about Ife Jones. So, and it's an amazing exhibit. We were supposed to have a lecture later this month in person, so we're doing that online. So again, we're using this opportunity while the building is closed to the public to do some repairs and maintenance. And then again, your platform bringing us online is great. And so we can show people the beauty of the Octagon and whet their appetites to come when they're in DC later on. But we will also, we're looking at our 2 future exhibits that we were going to have, Blueprint for Better and Say It Loud. We're looking at online opportunities to share those. Well, and even if people can come back in the museum, I mean, what COVID has taught all of us is that, you know, there's a lot of ways that we can be together when we're not together, and we can learn and grow through our computers.
Definitely. And you've added quite a bit of programming to your website,
Yes.
kind of during this time too, to keep the connections with your with your members and with, you know, the public kind of going.
Right.
So you have a few different exhibits online right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The Faye Jones one, actually, there's a way you can kind of see the exhibit, and then there's a virtual reality element to it as well. And the activity pages, that was also a way to engage younger audiences with history.
Definitely. So do you have any timeline for reopening, or what's that looking like in your neck of the woods?
Well, I mean, to be honest, some of the repairs that we are working on are taking a little longer than I had expected. I would like to say that we might be back online after Thanksgiving, maybe, if people have not necessarily an appetite to travel to DC for the holidays, but even just people who are regional that have a pent up, you know, demand to be out and about and experiencing new things. But I will tell you, you know, ventilation is a big part of the conversation around COVID and how it is transmitted and how we need to be mitigating and protecting. So I am not going to, part of the maintenance we're doing is to our HVAC system. And I want to make sure that we've got all of our ducts in a row before we, before we reopen to the public. You know, my husband's a building science guy, so yeah, you want to use duct tape anywhere but your ducts. So anyway, but you know, as anxious as I am, there are also some really cool opportunities we could take advantage of this fall to be on the site, you know, regardless of if the pavilion can be there. You know, wouldn't it be cool to have some sort of an outdoor painting exercise and maybe have people compare and contrast the Brutalist AIA building to the federal style Octagon building? You know, there's a lot of creative things you can do, and I know the National Trust is doing a lot both inside and outside where they can. So, you know, we're in a hurry to share this gem, but you know, it could be next year before, you know, it makes sense.
No, definitely. You want to be smart and safe about it too. Lindsay, did we have any other questions?
So the only other question we had was, how can people get the backgrounds that we're using? So that's something I can easily answer. I've shared that link, which goes to Mortar's Forum, and that's where everyone can get these really cool backgrounds. And there are plenty more to use too. These are just 3 of the many. So make sure to look at that. And then also too, I have just shared Marci's email and Jen's. So if you're, you know, watching this recording after the fact of the webinar, you just have additional questions, feel free to reach out to them at any time, or you can always contact me, Mortar's community manager, and I can definitely share those emails with them. So, but yeah, it looks like we just got 2 minutes to spare. So I want to thank you both for coming on our webinar and sharing information about the Octagon and, you know, everything else that you've shared. Is just so informative. And sometimes I think it's really nice to kind of switch webinars up a little bit, you know, kind of do something a little bit more informal, you know, with our 3 faces answering questions. So I've really enjoyed it. So thank you both for coming.
Yeah, and thank you, Marci, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. It's really fun to be able to put faces and voices behind the forum articles that we're publishing. So thank you, Marci.
Thank you for having us, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys too.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.